Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby. Here with me is two members of the sound team from Everything Everywhere All at Once, Brent Kiser and Andrew Twite. Uh, you all, this movie is so huge. And when a description, when I read a description that includes a multiversal hopping conflict, that immediately to me conjures a certain kind of science fiction technology-based sound. But I would say this movie, the sound design really feels very organic to me. So I'm curious, what was the journey that led you to that kind of sonic landscape?
Yes. No, I'm kidding.
Great. Next question.
Yeah. No, I mean, the thing is, a lot of the tech that we saw and that, the Daniels presented to us was very lo-fi. They didn't necessarily need it to be super sci-fi. I think one of the big things with time travel is, there's two options. There's either full-blown, like, Minority Report, like we're using our hands to move everything around, or you go full, like, primer to where it's just like the most bottom layer of things. And we had a little bit of the in between. But it was important that sounds, the bigger part was familiar. You know what I mean? We're doing so many crazy sideways things. And I think what the Daniels do so well is somehow find nostalgia to present new ideas. And so, because you're so used to this thing, you can accept this thing. And so, a lot of it direction was we're living in a Windows 95 world rather than, brand new bleeps and bloops. So that's when it got really fun because, Andrew and I look at each other like, all right, cool. We're getting our 8-bit stuff out. And then we're like, oh no, that's too old. And then it's just like, our childhood comes back. We're just seeing the green mountain in the background or the green hill with the blue. We're like, all right, we're in it. Um, and then I think the other thing we found too was it it needed to be musical. I think that was a big thing that Andrew and I found out because at first our jobs are really to stay out of the way of music. And so, we try to make everything atonal and a little bit out of the way. But then we found like, oh no, they want a tonality to it that has, it's not just bleep, 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 it's bleep, 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 and we're giving kind of a musicality to it to get it to a place of, like we said, nostalgia, storytelling. Previous work we've done with them is how to make you laugh at a fart and how to make you cry at a fart. And so, same thing here. We needed to be able to put the right emotion in the right place.
Yeah.
there was a there was a natural rhythm to the entire movie, even the way it was cut between the Daniels and Paul Rogers. It was very methodically thought out. Everything, there was a pacing to everything. There was a rhythm that went with the music, and so the sound design was actually naturally able to follow those beats as well. And that it was a great lesson for us in timing and rhythm. And because if our design countered the rhythm of the music or even the cut of the pictures, it can take you out of it. It can be very jarring. So, like, even the way it was cut was like kind of a huge asset in allowing us to like create a very warm, natural sound design. And like Brent said, they had an aversion to too much of a modern sound, too much of a sci-fi sound. We tried a few things early on. It was just too much, and it just didn't fit. And so, like, we were able to take cues from the Daniels as far as that was concerned, but we also learned as we were cutting that, okay, this just feels right. So, like, we could kind of go with our guts there a little bit more. And yeah, other than that, it was just trying to keep up with the demand of the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, it seems pretty demanding because each world that Evelyn is hopping between is so drastically different from the
Mm.
next. Does it feel like you're almost creating multiple movies in that sense, or how did you work on that?
From
Everything
from a
everywhere all at
back
once.
from a backgrounds perspective, it definitely felt like that at times, because there are moments where we're only in a universe for a couple of seconds. And this was something Brent and I were talking about early on and not that long ago is, you know, we decided, you know, that's one of the effective ways of helping tell this story, is to like kind of bring the audience into these environments, and fully immerse them, even if it's for a couple of seconds. So we could strategically maybe use some mono elements strategically placed to kind of remind the viewer that they're there, but it's not all about, like, it's just trying to flow through and not take anyone out of it. And all the while using, you know, the Atmos field to like really engulf you. And the rest was just driven by music in the story. And so, yeah, I mean, it was something we definitely thought about, but it wasn't something we wanted to focus on so much that it would ever take you out of what was going on in the film.
Right.
If that makes
I
sense.
think the stuff we kind of talked about earlier was like focused cacophony of sound. You know, the Daniels really wanted to, you know, the whole point of this movie is to make sense of the noise. You know what I mean? So we had to establish noise. We had to establish everything. Everything's big. So it wasn't as much as like verse, 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 verse. It needs to be noise, verse, verse, verse. And so finding moments to poke through to help with the narrative of things, you know, that was the big, you know, let's throw everything against the wall, see what fits. Oh shit, everything fit. Which one do we need to look at?
Also
So,
keeping in mind that this was a theatrical release. It wasn't, and you know, I hope people will watch it streaming, but the whole idea was of it being played in the theater. So to like just really make it part of the experience, to let the audience feel those spaces, especially when necessary, when they could really shine, it was great. But if not, it's like, you know, there's a comfort of sitting in that world and not feeling like you're in the theater. You're just in the story. And that was a big goal of ours from the get-go, but also a direction we were given early on before we even started cutting. And then we were able to use specific elements to like kind of help pull us in and out of those worlds, to where like the glass breaking, the radio, these are story elements that were kind of letting you know what was going on specifically with the characters and why we were jumping between those verses. So, you know, every sound had a lot of intention to it, I feel. And yeah, it was all just storytelling device, I would say.
The radio kind of becomes like that, like tuning sound of switching channels. That's kind of almost like a theme for Stephanie Shu's character.
Yes.
Was that like a helpful way to look at it because it jumps through so many universes? Did you find yourself focusing on themes like that?
oh yeah. You
Absolutely.
know, towards the beginning, you know, we're really lucky. We're all kind of in the same neighborhood. Paul Rogers and my studio, Unbridled Sound, is all in the same building. So the great thing is well, the pain in the ass was we're so excited. Everybody's going to be in the same building, and then COVID happened, and we're like, nobody's working in the building. But
It's true.
you know, we're so used to being around each other and talking. You know, the ideas of what is it, how do we get through other verses, and like we said before, using technology that is memorable and accessible with memory and nostalgia, and yeah, changing channels in this thing. We had developed these radio whooshes that we had already kind of had this library together that we really liked, and we gave that to Paul to help them kind of initially get it into the edit and get it into the story, to help with the narrative of those things. And so then by that time, we were able to really help weave that into the edit, which was really nice because a lot of times, you know, it's like, all right, cool, we made this movie, make it sound rad. And you're like, you never thought about us until now. Okay.
And
Um,
they were great about that. The radio in particular, one of the first full scenes we saw was the hallway scene, where you really get a full-blown sense of Jobu and her character. We've seen her at that point, and we've seen the tuning a bit, but this was our first real like introduction to her. And it was something that we got a note about from the Daniels. They were like, all right, take a crack at this scene, just kind of go nuts. But they also said, like, you know, here when we're at the elevator, we would love to start playing with this radio element because this is a huge aspect of her character. So we just took a swing, and honestly, like what you see in the movie is like a lot of what we did on that first pass. And it was able to define the way she kind of moves through the universe, all the while like the glass for Evelyn you know, she's still learning how to control her powers and move. And this whole idea of like a fractured sense, like that's where the glass came from. And they became a design crutch for me at times, to be able to be like, oh, we can move out by just bringing a little of this glass in, and then we fade out, you know. And the Daniels were really responsive to that and like helped us push it even further. But yeah, those elements, those were, I think they were not only like very added color to the sound design itself, but it also allowed us, I don't know, it just gave us something to help us move the story along and have a voice with this wonderful rhythmic music that was driving a lot of the movie. So it gave our
Sunlux
design
and
a bit
Ryan
of a
set
voice.
us up.
Yeah.
Big shout out to Ryan, Lott, Rafiq, and Ian. I mean, they set us up amazing with the rhythm of everything. You know, so we got to be like kind of like soloists in this amazing jazz ensemble of like, you know what I mean? Like, hey, we've made this cool shit. I'm like, cool. Can I come and hang out?
Yeah. It's like, wow, is our stuff really playing along with your stuff? That's awesome.
Yeah. They work alongside each other very well, the sound and the music in this film. I am curious, I'm wondering what, if any, of your process changes when you have to design for something that, you know, the world hasn't seen before. Because some of these universes are, you know, she's just a movie star maybe, but then there's the hot dog finger universe, and I don't know that I've ever seen anyone with hot dog fingers. So how does that change the process when it's like, this is a totally new sandbox?
For me, you want to go, Brent?
Yeah, go first, man.
I mean, for me, I found a little more comfort in the hot dog fingers. Like that's the kind of thing that's like, oh, like nobody knows exactly what this is supposed to sound like. You know, the guys had an idea. There was one element that they had in their temp that we absolutely ended up keeping. Like it's a wet, like the wettest sound of it all. It's like someone putting their finger in cat food. And it's like, it adds that comedic sense, which is something I learned. Like they like the Daniels themselves have this sense, like they're funny people, and they know what works and what will make people laugh, and they know when they want to make someone laugh. So with the hot dog fingers, the concept itself is pretty funny, but for me, there's a comfort in the unknown in that regard, because it's like it gives you a bit of license to just kind of go big and try whatever you can. So like what ended up being the meat, for lack of a better word, of the hot dog fingers were just a bunch of random elements that I recorded at home. And like you know, they all got comped together, and then we just kept those highlights, those accents from what the Daniels had found with that cat food. And it just kind of all naturally came together. Like, so what I'm saying is, like, when there's something that, you know, doesn't really exist, like that actually gives us a ton of freedom. And it just allows you to kind of play around. I mean, you're trying to accomplish something, but it helps you to understand what works and what doesn't. And, you know, those were really, really great example of that.
Yeah. I mean, this is where the feeling is more important. You know what I mean? It's not what does it sound like? It's, oh, you know exactly what those things feel like now. You know exactly all of this stuff. You know, in a weird way, you're like, I kind of know what they smell like. You know what I mean? Like you have all of these like thoughts in your head, and you know, we're able to ground it. That's really what we've done, is help ground it in a reality that's not a reality.
You want to make it feel real. Like I had a guy I worked with a few years ago put it really well. It's like taking something extraordinary and making it feel natural. And that, you know, that was in my head as I was trying to build those out. It's like, okay, you know, they may sound like this, but they have to have a specific weight, like the way they hit against each other, not just the way they interact with other objects. And, you know, also don't overthink it. Just make it fun.
Yeah. Well, before I let you go, you mentioned before that it's a very, you know, there's a huge sonically robust film, right? And there's a lot of noise, as you said. But when I left the film, one of the things you walk away with is really like the emotional impact at the end when the sound, there's a change to it. And especially between, you know, Michelle and Stephanie's scenes. how do you, from a design perspective, make sure that those emotional beats pop through such a really, noisy movie?
Yeah. So remember back in like the 70s and 80s, like they were like, if you play this record backwards, it'll say like satanic messages.
Yeah.
Andrew and I are actually whispering, call your mom in the sides. And so I think that's the big turn you hear. No, I'm kidding. No, I think the biggest thing is especially that parking lot scene. That was the one that's just like gut punch, because I think that's the moment where everybody in the audience knows what it's like to go from a child to an adult, and please recognize me as my own person. And then the scary thing is, as a parent, that's the moment when I'm realizing, shit, my kid's going to grow up and this is going to be our conversation I'm about to have. And so the duality of it was so amazing. And the best thing for us, get out of the way.
That's not our time. Yeah. Sorry.
One of the most effective parts of the whole movie is the rock scene. And the funny thing about that is we get out of the way. So that's the gorgeous thing about this thing, especially with Dan Kwan, was always like, build, drop, build, drop. Like
that was term used over and over on stage. It's like swell.
And that's the thing is, in that moment, you're able to sit in your emotions. We're not telling you how to feel anymore. We're not guiding you or anything. Now it's just, how do you feel?
You're still in the movie. We're still trying. Like those are moments, especially the rock scene, the parking lot, where we ground it back into the space and let the story, the dialogue drive. And those are really important moments when you're getting pummeled for 45 minutes with fight scenes and a lot of humor and some beautiful shots and great action, but without those breaths and that moment of serenity and reality, like where you are at that point. We're not in some really weird universe. We're back to the whole point of the story, and giving the audience a reprieve. Like, and for us, being able to do that is to pull back and not be in the way. It's not about our design just shining. It's about letting the movie play.
Yeah, and why should I ever get in the way of Michelle Yeoh and Stephanie Hsu?
Right?
They might be better at their job than I am, so I'm going to let them do their thing.
Very valid. Well, it's amazing work in this film. So thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about it.
Thanks for letting us talk your leg off.
Thanks for having us.
Anytime. If you're out there watching at home, subscribe to Gold Derby. Keep in touch with us throughout this season. There's plenty more interviews just like this. Andrew, Brent, thank you so much.
Thank you
very much. Appreciate it, Sam.